Hello, I'm Jamie, and this video is going to talk about my Calarts and ArtCenter portfolio. Wow, I don't know how to do introductions, and I'm doing this video without any script. So there's going to be a lot of cutting, a lot of rambling, but I hope that's okay. So, just basic information about me is that I applied twice to the Calarts character animation program, and the first time was 2020 when I was a senior in high school, and I didn't get in. But at the same year, I applied to other schools like SVA, SAIC, Ringling, I think, yeah, and I got accepted into those schools. And I originally intended to go to SVA, but then COVID happened, so I couldn't go. And I decided to go to community college for a year instead and was re-elevating my entire life decisions because that's what quarantine does to you. So then last year, like around this time, I was like, what if I reapply to Calarts just for fun, just like for little giggles? And I did. And then the second time I applied in 2021, I got in. Wow, and that's how I'm here today. Oh yeah, also this is the portfolio I pretty much used for ArtCenter. I didn't apply to ArtCenter in 2020, but since COVID and quarantine was all happening, I decided to apply to schools that were in California instead because I live in California, and that will create less hassle versus traveling to the other side of the country. That was my logic. So I'm gonna show the work I made for Calarts first because I applied to Calarts first time-wise, and then I'll show the different things I made for ArtCenter since their deadline was later. Oh yeah, also I forgot to say this earlier, but please take everything I say in this video as a grain of salt. Like, I'm not even done with my first semester of Calarts as I'm recording this. Like, I don't know what reviewers actually want or need. This is just my thoughts when I was making my portfolio. And like, if you disagree with anything I say, then you don't have to take anything I say to heart. Thank you. Also, I am just promoting myself here, but I talk about all my portfolio pieces and just general portfolio advice and my process way more detailed and more coherent on Gumroad. It's a PDF and it's only $1 because Gumroad makes you put a money price for big files. But if you can't afford the price, just like message me on any social media and I'll tell you the discount link for it to be free. Like, I want this to be a resource that's widely available. And like, if you have any questions, like, feel free to comment under this video, I guess, or just message me as well. And I'll provide you with my advice that I'll do my best with. I don't know if I'm that credible or if what I'm saying in this video is going to be very coherent, so I'm sorry. I'm not doing a script. I'm literally just rambling. So there's going to be a lot of editing. Yeah. This is just a Google Drive and my general stuff. For the Calarts portfolio, they like observational stuff and creative stuff. That's just like what they say on their website. You need two things. So I put my observational stuff first. And this is just a general order of what I had. So let's start with each of these things. Okay, so here's the first piece I did. This is done with ink, a fairly big sheet of paper. I can't remember how big, but like bigger than printer paper. And around this time when I was making my portfolio, it was hard to draw actual people from life. So I like messaged my friends like, can you send photos of yourself? And then a bunch of them sent photos, and then I drew them. So this is one of them. And this was a figure I did for the portfolio development workshop John Mahoney and his assignment was to do like figures, so I did figures. This is with like an eyedropper, and then like like poured the ink onto a piece of paper, and then I used a brush with like water to like smear out like some of the flat edges and the shading. That's why it kind of looks splattered but loose. And then when I was giving these images to Mahoney, he really liked them, and he said I should put them in. So I wanted my first piece in the portfolio to be something that's like very striking and like gives a first impression, like good strong first impression, because these people, when they're looking at your portfolio, they're gonna see a lot of portfolios and they're gonna be skimming through them as well. So you really want to leave like a really like quick and strong impression, especially in your first piece. Okay, my second piece is also part of that series of ink figures, and it's another friend who's sitting on a chair. And I went a little less crazy to this one. Like in the first one, there's like a bunch of paint splatters and it's more expressionistic or whatever, and then this one is more grounded. You see more form, more shading, like you can see different patches of the jacket. So I wanted to kind of lean in from the first piece to show that I can draw people and draw faces and such like that. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. Third piece. That's also another ink figure I did. And these were also ink figures from Mahoney's class, where he gave us like a video of a figure drawing model, and we were told to pause at different parts and to draw the model out. So then I used the same process of an eyedropper and then like the ink to draw these. So in these, I tried pushing perspective more, because that's how the model was towards the camera, like sometimes the hands closer, sometimes the feet, sometimes the face, and showing that you have an understanding of like both anatomy and like your ability to exaggerate and proportion is something I think Calarts is looking for, and just art school in general. So I put these pieces as well. This is blind contour, or like a semi-blind contour, where I was like kind of cheating and looking at it occasionally. So for people who don't know, blind contours are when you draw something without lifting your like pen or pencil, and you don't look at the paper, so you have no clue what your thing looks like until you're finished. So I like sat next to like a mirror and held up my sketchbook to my knee and just drew myself drawing. I didn't know what I looked like until I finished, and it ended up in this jumbled, garbled mess. But you can sort of see my like, you know there's a face, and you know there's like a body, and you know there's the shoe down there. So it just shows you can capture form, and like self-portrait is always cool, and blind contour is always fun. Yeah. Personally, like looking at it now, I think I should have put this piece in a different location, but I'll talk about organization later. Okay, so this next piece was 2 figure drawings I did for a Zoom figure drawing session. So when I applied, it was during the height of the pandemic, so no one could really go to in-person figure drawing, which sucks, because in-person figure drawing is just a way different experience than looking on the screen, but I didn't really have a choice. So then I can't remember the username for the model I drew in this, but she's really credible and does a lot of figure drawing sessions, and usually you can look for them online, and the models will have a fee, and then after you pay the fee, you'll get a link, and then you get to draw them in real time, and it's really useful. And I think the Zoom sessions are all good because you get to support models during the middle of the pandemic, and you also get figures that are unique to you, versus online figure drawing sites are good, but almost everyone has access to those same stock photos and such, so it can look repetitive to reviewers, or at least that's the impression I get, because you have to keep in mind that reviewers are going to look at hundreds of portfolios, and if you use live drawing sources from pretty popular sites, then they're definitely going to notice repeating poses and models, and they might suspect you just referenced a photo, which I think is kind of detrimental in a sense, because not everyone can afford to go to figure drawing sessions or find like non-free resources, but that's how it is. Yeah, I did these digitally, but it's with pencil brush and Procreate, so it looks traditional, and it sort of gives like a feel that I sort of did it in charcoal, which was the look I wanted to go for, because I actually don't have charcoal. So at the time, I still wanted to include some kind of charcoal style figure drawing, so this is the way I did it. And I tried to add effects and like a blur and such to it look more traditional, and like if you look just like a little more closely, you can tell it's digital, but that's fine. Yeah. And the reason why I included these figures too is because they're costume figures as well, and costume figures allow you to portray like a personality through your figures, versus like nude only limits you to like show anatomy. In a sense, costume figures let you show like the personality, right? Like the mood. Like I tried to create more somber, mysterious feel with the cigarette on the right, so you can show like, oh, I can draw models of different ways. I can draw clothing, and this is why I included this set. Okay, this next one is a piece I did with just the Sharpie ink, and then I colored it a little bit digitally for the gray areas, and it's just a photo of my friend holding a notebook. Yeah, and honestly, I don't really like this piece, and I feel like I could have removed it, because if you don't know already, there's a thing in figure drawing called contrapposta, I believe, which is like how to make a pose more interesting is like the angles of the shoulder to the hips, and usually you want them to be opposite of each other, so it creates like a naturally like more interesting pose. But if you study this pose, the hips and shoulders are completely parallel and like horizontal, like the person is literally just standing, so it's not like anything particularly interesting that shows gesture and such. But I think it still serves a purpose, and like I don't think it really hurt my portfolio that much, because I don't usually draw feet and hands and fingers that much. But the thing is, for portfolio, at least for a college portfolio, you do want to show you have strong enough technical skills to prove that yes, I can draw feet and hands. And this pose has both of these, yes. And it also shows like form in the clothing and like details in the hair. So it's kind of just a thing I wanted to add to be like, hey, I have basic fundamental skills. Please ignore that the pose is just a person standing. But yeah, this is just my like logic of, oh, if I were to apply again, if I were to change anything, if I would include this figure drawing or not, because I think the figure drawing is fine itself. It's just that next time, if I had the luxury, like because this was my friend, I just asked them to pose, I would ask, like if you're asking people to pose for you, to like do a variety of poses for you to choose from and such. Okay, so these 3 quick poses are probably like one of the oldest observational drawings I have in my portfolio, because I only did them like a month or 2 after I got rejected from Calarts in the first time. And it was because CTN Animation used to host live streams of old model sessions just on like YouTube during the pandemic, and they were just things you could like join for free online and just draw them. So I would do that, yeah. And I really liked this session and this model. Like, the poses are super interesting. There's a lot of details you can add in the skirt and the boot. So even though these were kind of old and like in some parts it kind of feels flat, I still really like them. And that's why I put them in the end, because in animation, obviously, you want to show that I can draw a body, and I can draw it really quick in gestures. So these were my 3 gesture poses. And I also really like brush pens, and you'll see them more later in Portfolio. I think it creates like a really like nice and loose feel. So I think like compared to the ink stuff I did previously, I think a piece like this allowed me to show that I can draw loosely, I can draw quickly, and I can like show form super fast. Yeah. This is another set of 3 quick poses. These are done with a charcoal pencil, and they're in a pretty big scale. It's just that when I scan them and compile them together, they look kind of small. But these were also from a Zoom figure drawing session, and I forgot the exact name of the platform, but they saved their live streams and put them on Gumroad for you to buy or download. And at the time when I was doing my portfolio, I was kind of paranoid, and I was worried I didn't have enough masculine looking models, because honestly, if you go online and look for like resources for your drawing, it's mainly like assigned female at birth like models, and I wanted to show that I can draw different body types, which is why later on I tried looking for like more unique models or themes. So when I tried to approach these a little different than the ones before. These are more like contoury, and they kind of give a blind contour feel, but not really. And they're all, in the one on the left, I even played around with like how would I cut off form and shadow just by choosing the lines, and then I digitally colored them in. So it's kind of just to show that this is variety. I can also push proportions, like you can see in the middle one and the left one, the feet and the knee are really close in relation. But even though I can push proportions, I still understand the limitations of the body. Yeah, it's just 3 gestures. This is another set of 3 gestures. They're done with a colored Sharpie pen. Yeah, so we're starting to see a trend here with a lot of 3 figures. I did a lot. Yeah, so this is trans masculine person model, yes. And like I said before, I really wanted to go variety and like body. So when I found this model, I was like, whoa, this is really cool and unique. So I decided to draw them. And I also tried pushing proportions here, especially since the model themselves, they did like wearing more dramatic angles, and it was a tarot card theme thing, so that's why there's the card there on the right. This is a contour sort of style, but I still put in like time to show details and clothing folds and like wrinkles and such. And also this pose also like let me show the reviewers that I can draw feet, and I can draw hands and fingers, and I can draw the overall body form. And then the head on towards the left was actually me redrawing the head of the model a second time to see if I could capture better. And I think like showing that kind of sequential, or like you kind of like learning and figuring out the model is also cool, which is why I decided to put it there. I don't know if it like actually hurt or like helped my portfolio, but that was something I like purposely included. Whoa. Okay, so these were done with the same Sharpie ink pen, but these are way more scribbled and loose. And this was a Zoom figure session of a professional ballerina, and the whole time she was just doing like standard ballet poses, but she was like constantly cycling and moving through them, so you didn't have time to do like the long poses with like the detailed clothing folds and hands like I showed before. And at first it was really stressful for me because I was worried that I wouldn't be able to capture the gesture clear enough, but then I tried to go for a different kind of look where I would like layer the arms and the legs together onto the same model. And especially with the one on the right, it kind of looks like a weird merge of like 2 people together, but I really liked it, and I think it shows like me actively observing the model, and this is really me studying how the model is constantly in motion. I think that's super helpful to show in observational drawings, because sometimes when we spend too long to look at them, they can feel very flat, especially since like most of my figure drawings were done through a screen. And when you do them through a screen, it's way easier to get off the impression they're like photo studies, or you spent longer than the model actually posed when drawing them. So I feel like even though these were rougher, it kind of is like a vulnerableness, if that's the way to put it. Yeah. I don't know, I just really like these, and I ended up doing a lot of ballerina stuff because they were so fun, which we can see with this one. Yeah, so this is the brush pen, similar to the one I used before, and I believe this is the same model doing another set of poses, and I approached with a similar style. So this is a model just like she's standing in the same spot, but she's constantly moving her feet and her arms and even her head. I just drew it over and over again to really show that I was studying how this model is moving. And like if you look really carefully, it's honestly super sloppy. Like the hands and like fingers do like look broken, and like a lot of the legs are really choppy. Like upon observation, you can like looking closer, you can tell this is not me drawing super detailed, but you can tell that the model was really moving, and that was like the only amount I was able to capture. So yeah, I don't know if me being messy actually like benefited or like hurt me, but I really liked the look and like looseness of these, so that's why I put them. Like everyone approaches figure drawings differently, but I always find brush pen and like ink stuff super fun, so that's why I put these. Yeah. Speaking of ink, here's another ink one, and this is with China India ink. It's a dark blue ink on a pretty decently big piece of paper, and this was also done through a Zoom model session. So similar to like the first figures I had like in the very beginning, I took eyedropper tool. No, this one I didn't use eyedropper tool. No, this one I just used a brush and dipped it with ink, and then did like really quick strokes. Like I think this was honestly, when I first did this pose, it was like 3 to 5 strokes, and then I didn't add any ink to my brush and only used like water to it and spread the ink and let like the ink and water mix to allow me to add more details and create this like more ambiguous form of a person posing. And like honestly, I kind of chose this purely for the vibes. I just really like this kind of more like ambiguous figure drawing, but like some people have told me this looks more fine arts and they would have put this in portfolio. And if you look to like the right side of this model where I wanted to like block in the background so you could see the arm more, it's like really sloppy in the line choice. Like I know that's a really small nitpick, but it looks kind of like haphazard when I should have been more careful with how I blocked it in. And like if you zoom far away, it creates a weird like silhouette. This is just being nitpicky, but I talked to a lot of people when I was applying. In the end, I was like, if I like this piece so much emotionally, then I should put it. And that's the thing you will learn with putting in a lot of your pieces, is that if you are really emotionally connected or like really proud of something, then you should just put it and you should show it, because at the end of the day, this is the work you want to demonstrate. Yeah. Ooh. And this is another ink pose done in a similar style. I believe I actually used an eyedropper for this. Yes, I used a eyedropper on, is it red ink? And then I drew the form, and then afterwards I used the ink brush with some water to shade in it. And I also feel like I kind of feel the opposite way from the previous drawing, was that I don't really like this one. I feel that the arms and like the hands part is kind of muddled in with the hair of the face, and the face was like weirdly small. Like I actually had to digitally edit the face and like the upper half to be bigger so it wouldn't look like weirdly small versus the torso and like the chest, ribs, and then the legs. But when I was also showing this to different people, they said they really enjoyed it, which surprised me. That's like another thing that's like the opposite spectrum, where it's like sometimes the pieces you don't enjoy are actually like very enjoyable to other people. So it's always good to hear like different perspectives and like why people like these pieces and whatever. So I decided to put this piece in too, because it had such a, even though these two pieces side by side seem very similar, I had like different emotional connections to them and different responses from other people. So yeah, there's like a careful balance I felt I had to do, where it's like, do I want to please my reviewers, because obviously you're being reviewed, right? This is an application, versus I want to stay true to myself and always put the work I'm most proud of. So there's like this careful like balance you need to do, but I think if you trust your instincts, it all works out. Yes. Woo. Okay, wow, I did a lot of ink figures. Okay, so this is my last ink figure, and this one is also more experimental, and this was like a brush that was extremely watery with like the last remaining ink. So these were all pretty much in the same session. So when I was doing these poses, I had a lot of ink, and then it was toward the end of the session, so I didn't have that much ink, but I still wanted to get rid of like the little bit I had. So I had this very like thinned out ink as I was drawing this, and that's why the brush is kind of like scratchy and dry. But I ended up really liking this one. Like the abstract like goopiness really makes you feel like emotion and pose. The mold I had, even though the face is sort of obscure, but like the face is there, the hair is there, the shadows are blocking out the forms, blah blah blah, all this technical stuff. But yeah, just like the energy it creates, ink figures are really fun. So I put this one as my last ink figure because so at the beginning I talked about how you want to start off strong, so you also want to end strong as well, and this is sort of like a way of tying together that I really like ink stuff. And don't be afraid to show more like experimental stuff. I guess that was the thing I was worried about the whole time in my portfolio, was that my ink figures were too like fine arts and illustration leaning versus like what animators want, but I think it worked out in the end. Yes. Okay, so now we're entering the observational section, but it's not like figure drawing. And this is a spread from my actual sketchbook, like the Calarts Sketchbook I submitted. And it is of my little brother playing on Nintendo Switch. I think he's playing Breath of the Wild, and he was trying to fight Ganon, but he kept messing up like the part where you have to like shield reflect his beam every single time, so he was super mad. And yeah, so I just drew him yelling and being really mad that he couldn't do it. You got it in the end, don't worry. He was able to beat Ganon. So this is just me drawing my brother a lot. I like every time he would use his hand with the controller, I would draw the hand again. Every time he like shuffled and stood up or sat in the chair or something like that, I drew that. And I also, to the right, you can see me pushing the proportions of his face and shrinkling it up. Sorry, brother. And then I made his hand with the controller really big. It was just me playing around with the same subject and showing how I can exaggerate and like observe the same thing from different angles. Technical stuff, And me coloring in the jacket was just like for fun, and also if you like loosely color in some things, it naturally draws the eye there. So then this was just me being like, oh, look at my brother. Look at these like specific sketches of my brother first before looking at the other ones. Yeah. Ooh. This is another portfolio piece I did, but it's of my bedroom, and I'm like sitting in the middle of it, and I'm drawing myself, drawing in the sketchbook. And then the first time I drew it was with one ink color pencil, and then I forgot for what reason I had to leave my room before I was finished drawing with it. So when I came back, I used a different pen and finished coloring it in. But by the time I came back, my room was like slightly different. So I also drew like visually the differences, like the clock on the top right is different, and then the chair was moved and my hands aren't exactly in the same position. And I have a lot of criticisms for this. I don't really like it now that I look at it. Like, I forgot to say this for the first sketchbook piece, is that putting sketchbook spreads in your portfolio is kind of like, like, you want to avoid doing it. Because if the reviewers see that a lot of your sketchbook is also in your portfolio, they start to get the vibe that, it just looks repetitive. It's not a good thing you want. So I put 2 of them. I know a lot of people put theirs, like, only put them if you have to. And if you do put sketchbook spreads in your portfolio, make sure they're good. Yeah, obviously, like, I don't think they're original file. Oh yeah, in my original file size of my portfolio, you notice how this is like a spiral bound? I edited out the spiral, so it like looked like 2 separate pages I scanned and put together. So it's sort of like, that also helped reduce the vibe that it was a sketchbook. And I think I also edited out some of like that sketchbook page line you can sort of see, so it looked more like observational. Yeah, so that also helps too. But on the technical side, I don't really like this piece. Like, I know technically I'm sort of doing this fisheye distorted look, but it just doesn't read as clearly as what like I hope it would, and the lines are super sloppy the closer I look into it. Like, I really could have put more care and time to make this more proper. Like the bed, I super haphazardly drew the things in, but when you look closely, you're like, this doesn't make sense. I don't know what's on the table. The clock looks really cartoonish because I really didn't observe the clock when I was drawing it. Yeah, there's just a lot of, like, I feel like if I did this again, I would put more time and detail into it because I did this super rushed. Because I also did my sketchbook really fast. But I don't think it really hurt my portfolio too much because I did want to show that I could draw the interior of a room. And this shows that I can do an interior room. And that's like another problem I had when applying with that. Since it was the pandemic, you couldn't really go outside or into other places to really study. So you really only have like the house constantly to observe interior stuff. And if you're like most people, my house is boring, so I really struggled with this. Like, my room isn't decorated with unique things and such. This is another semi-blanc contour similar to the portrait I had earlier, but it's of a potted plant in my house. I think this was done for the John Mahoney class as well. It's just a plant. I don't know what else to say. I wanted to put this in to be like, I can draw vegetation in plants. Because like I said before, during the pandemic, you can't really go outside and touch grass and look at trees. So this potted plant was the only real way I got to show I was drawing vegetation. And this is one of those potted plants with like really wrinkly and curvy trunks. So I was able to emphasize the details in the trunk and play around with the shape of the leaves. And the fact that it was semi-blank contour meant the pale or the pot area wasn't completely solid, but I think created a very interesting look. So this piece was a set of goat observationals I did with just a normal mechanical pencil. And I wanted to include these because I wanted to show that I can draw animals. But the thing is, I do not have any pets, so in the middle pandemic, it was kind of hard to find animals to draw with. So I went through my phone gallery and like swiped back, and I found these photos I took in the pen museum like over a year ago, and I actually used them in my first Calarts Portfolio, some of them. So then I just reused the photos, yeah. And there's just photos and videos that quotes I took, and then I did a couple studies to just be like, hi, I can draw animals, because that is a technical skill I wanted to show. But I don't think it's necessary in a portfolio. Like, I know a lot of people, like, except for people who did not put animals, or like didn't put vegetation. Like, if it's not your strength, don't put it. But I feel like I'm okay at drawing goats, so I put that. And when I was drawing these goats, because I knew I was gonna, I'm like doing them from a photo or video, so I was worried they wouldn't be as clear, or like that they were done with like an observational from life. So to reduce that like flat photo aspect, I redrew their heads like over each other. Like you can see the one that's more in the middle left. There is a video where the goat was looking upwards and then it turns down its head to eat the grass. So then I drew it, the head twice, so you could get the impression that I was really observing the goat in real time. Yeah, I have a lot of observation stuff with that kind of sequential look, because I think it gives off a cool look, and then it also just reinforces the idea that you as the artist have been like really observing whatever you see in front of you. Okay, so this is an environment scene with people in it. And this was another thing I also, you can see this pattern here. I couldn't go outside because of COVID. So I found some old photos I took where I was inside a old Chinese herbal shop, and this is just a bunch of aunties and grandmas there, and then there's the cashier and workers in the observational I did in the middle, and then a lady checking out stuff. So I feel like it's really important to show subjects in the environment, and I kind of wish I had more time or like more pieces like that. I actually did this piece very last minute because I realized when I was putting my portfolio together that I didn't have any like subjects or matters shown in the environment. Like it was always just like the environment, or it's just the figure, when it's actually like pretty important, at least in my opinion, to showcase that you know how to put like people in space and perspective and such. So I drew this like literally like the day before applications closed. I like quickly drew this and then slammed it in. So I could be like, yes, I actually know how to do this, by the way. And I actually like specifically chose a Chinese herbal shop because I am Chinese and I did want to show that this is part of like my life and my experiences. So instead of just choosing like a normal supermarket or like a typical mall, I went for something that's more personal and something that I felt like would have more personality into it. So instead of choosing a typical supermarket or like an American standard mall, I went for like a small like Chinese store to show like personality and something that's more unique or in touch with me. So that's why you see like I have little red signs with like Chinese words to show the products and such, and then you can see there's a little like shrine sort of in the top middle, and then on the right there's like a jade Buddha. Yeah. So it's just like these little details to show how this environment is like distinct from like any from other shops. So like if you do have like ethnic background or something that's like very special or dear to you, like don't be afraid to show it. I think it adds like a nice touch of variety to your stuff and will also make you stand out. Okay, this is the start of my like observational work that's sort of digital. Like it's sort of the transition I had from my observational work to my creative work, which is like all done digitally. So this was done on a art program called Heavy Paint, and it's like it has a very distinctive style and brushes and like the tools it adds, and it has like a large amount of limitations, but it ends up creating a very like distinctive feel. So this is when I was messing around first in Heavy Paint, and I drew the view that I see in front of my bedroom window. So this is sort of a nice way to show that I know how to use digital mediums, I know textures, I know perspective, I know color, I know like the fore, mid, and background, all these kind of things. Yeah. This is another piece I did in Heavy Paint, but has like a very stark mood from the first one. These were both views from my house. This was from my backyard, and this was during the time somewhere during the pandemic when the California forest fires were really bad and made the sky like this very eerie orange red. So when that was happening, I decided to draw it real quick, and I think it creates like a really unique atmosphere. The perspective is like not distinct here. There's just like a foreground and a background here because I made the objects like very like crisp black, and there's only very simplistic lighting of the red. But I think the fact that it creates such a interesting like tone and color usage is nice, and I also just like the contrast of like day and like evening, night side by side. It shows that I can explore different moods, contrast, or whatever. Yeah. So that's why I put these two pieces there, and then yeah. Okay, so this is a film study I did, also still part of my observational work, and it's also for John Mahoney's Portfolio Development Workshop where you're supposed to do a film study. I cannot speak French, so I'm so sorry. I'm gonna butcher this. But the film was called La Jetée, and it's was made in 1962. It's like a science fiction film, but it's actually like a bunch of like images that are played over audio and not like sort of like full live action film. Very interesting. So then I did the line work for all of this traditionally in my sketchbook, which I will show later. And then I colored them in digitally, but I used a paper texture, which is why it looks like it's mainly traditional. Yeah, and then I digitally edited it together so it would look like this. So I just put a film study because I felt that the end result for this is like pretty nice. So I was like, why not include it? You know, I'm not actually the biggest fan of film studies, and I don't think they're necessary in the portfolio if that's not your thing. I also think it was like sort of also like a nice ease and transition to the creative work because the way I like stylize these boards are sort of similar to how I like later stylize my creative work. And there's just like me like playing around with values and perspective in here is just cool, just nice to show, a little fun. Oh yeah, and also this shows me doing composition and like sequential narrative work. Like even though this is not my story, I'm able to capture it. Okay, so now I'm gonna go on to the creative work. So this is my first piece in the creative work, and this is actually super old. I did this in like January 2020. It was for my CISA application, and the prompt was a self-portrait. So I created a face out of like the ocean waves, and then there's an like eye made out of the person in the swimsuit, and then the eyebrow is sort of like the dog that's swimming above it. And then I added like freckles, which I guess are like just ambiguous lights. They were just there to help make the image of the face more clear. And then the clouds around the waist sort of frame it into a face. So this piece was kind of hard to think about whether I should include or not because I'm still very fond of it, and I was very fond of it at the time too. And it's not very like animation portfolio, it's very much an illustration, But I really liked it, and I wanted to include it after talking to a lot of people. It was the same mindset of like, yeah, if you like this piece so much, then you should still put it because it is part of your creative voice. I don't know if I should have put it as my first piece for creatives now that I think about it, but it could have been worse. Yeah. This is an old piece I did back in late 2019 for CISA and its interpretation of the song Space Oddity. So this is even more illustration fine art. It's like pretty abstract idea of like a record disc shattered in space, and it's like the ghost of a hand and a record needle playing a forgotten song. Yeah, it's very out there, but I still really like it. It shows a lot of mixed media. It shows me playing with like a different form of storytelling that's not as like direct or obvious. And I feel like it was still a good choice to put it in the end. I'm still like debating why my past self put as a second creative piece. Like why did I put such illustrative pieces first thing for my creative work? But I think if I were to reapply or like rearrange again, I would put them somewhere more in the middle of my creative work. But it's not something I like regret putting in. Yeah. Okay. This is the start of my like animation pipeline creative work. It's part of my pitch called The Hunter's Shadow. And The Hunter's Shadow, just a general gist of it, is that it's about a retired British hunter that has to like atone for his past sins of causing so much like destruction through participating in colonialism and the slaughter of so many animals. So this is the design of my character. I literally did these designs on one layer. Yeah, like I didn't even think about like sketching them separately or like doing body parts separately. No, this is all one layer, which is not smart. If you actually want to do like a clean, good, like creative piece, don't be like what I did. Because you can see a lot of like weird layered, like messy details here and there because of it. Yeah. And also, I feel like I should have put a title. Like, I notice I have like these little descriptions of being like, oh, retired animal hunter, this is his personality, but what's his name? Like, I should have put like a little title maybe on the top left or right, being like, my pitch hunter Chateau, main character hunter. I feel like I should have put that. Or like, just put like a name bold so you like know who he is, right? Or like maybe his age or something. Like, I put that in the description when I was submitting it, but it's definitely like a very rough start for my creative pieces. Like, if I were to read this again, I would make this much more clean. But I think the expressions and the composition I made are okay. Like, if you look at the four facial expressions I made, they're all distinctive. And they all show like a different like emotion. So you can tell like I'm exploring with like the stylization and stuff. It's just very mixed feelings about this piece, yeah. Don't be as sloppy with me. Like, don't be as sloppy as me when doing your creative work, yeah. Okay, so this is the second part of my pitch for Hunter Shadow. This is another thing I should have done. Again, I should have put like a little title in the top corner or something to indicate what these pieces were. So this is the extension of the character design for my hunter. This is, you can see me exploring his age, a silhouette, front, side profile, a general idea of like how the shadow of the wolf interacts with him. You can see me write a little story synopsis there. Yeah. I did all these sketches like first try. It very much was just like an exploration, just messing around and such. And I kind of like the look of it. Like you can tell it's not supposed to be polished. You can tell I'm trying out different things, and that's all right. And another thing about me is that, as you can probably tell, I kind of hate the technical part of like character design work, which is like turnarounds, mount sheets, like very proportionate, very like structured. I, I'm not a fan of that. So I tried avoiding doing that because I did that the first time I applied and it turned out just really bad. And you can tell I really didn't like it. So that's another thing when thinking about your creative work is like you don't have to worry about your like creative work being that technically polished or like industry level. Like this is just speaking from my opinion. I don't know how other people or like how the reviewers feel. Like as long as you show like a strong like passion or unique creative voice, it's fine if it's not like presented in a totally like industry standard, if that makes sense. Because I feel like if I were to submit these pieces to an actual character design job, oof, I don't think it would cut it. Yeah. But this was just me presenting my raw ideas, and I think it got across to the reviewers. Yeah. Uh, so this is even more exploration, except this time I was exploring the wolf. And the idea of my pitch obviously is about how the shadow wolf connects to the figure. This is probably one of my favorite like visual development pieces. I feel like it's really unique because it's like specifically for my story. Like you can always do character designs, you can always do certain things, but this is specifically an exploration of how my pitch would work, which I think is pretty fun. It's pretty nice to mess around with. Yeah. There's a little, I just noticed a little technical error where like one shadow in the middle wolf doesn't actually get lighter, but yeah. So yeah, my creative works weren't very clean. But yeah, I didn't sketch these. I just used a lasso tool and like drew in these shapes and worked them around. And then I added some words on top explaining my thought process. Again, I feel like I should have put like a title on the top being like Hunter Shadow, Wolf Exploration, you know? But overall, I'm pretty happy with this piece and what it portrays. I was also super inspired by the canceled DreamWorks film, which I think is called Me and My Shadow, which explores a very similar idea of a character and and like his shadow interacting. Oof. Okay, more of my pitch. So, as you can see, most of my like later creative work is just like me presenting my pitch or story. So this is probably the oldest piece out of my pitch. It's an illustration that like started the whole idea, and it was for a horror zine I participated in. So there's the hunter in the middle, and he's sort of sleeping with his like little night glass. Ugh, I forgot what those are called. Thing to cover your eyes with when you sleep. He's holding a beer bottle, and then he's surrounded by these like hollow eyes of all the animals he's killed, and they're all hanging glued to the walls of his little trophy room. And then you see like the bear rug the bottom right. Very haunting, very spooky. So I included this because it was the first illustration I did, and it sort of is like a visual development piece, even though it's more illustrative. I wanted to show like how I explored this idea before it became like something more developed. Yeah. Also, I just did not have that many creative pieces, so I was just really looking for everything I could find. And since this was like the piece that like started all, I was like, I'm gonna put it in. Oof, okay, so this is my least favorite piece I made for the pitch. I feel like I shouldn't have included this or made this out in the first place. But this was supposed to be like a snapshot test, or like how, like if I made this as a film, how would it look like? And like, I hate this piece. I don't like it. The texture is weird. The like coloring just feels off to me. Like this wouldn't make sense as a look in the film. To be honest, I could have chosen a much more interesting, more dynamic shot to do. It feels kind of plain. Like, why would I make this as an entire piece for them to focus on? But you know what? I submitted it, so I don't know if it hurt my application or made it better. But I feel like if I were to reapply again, I would probably either like make better snapshots because that's what I made for ArtCenter. Like I just made this but better, and I would probably include those instead. Or if I would do similar shots like this but like multiple of them to show like how I explored like the stylization of the texture and such. Yeah. It just feels like pretty weak because it's so like simple and flat looking, but I made it like an entire illustration focus because you can see in my like literally the piece before I have such a detailed illustration and then it swaps to something so simple. Like it just doesn't flow correctly. Yeah. Ooh, okay, so this is my last part of the portfolio and also my creative work, which was my color script. So I wanted to show that I could do like narrative or sequential work in my creatives, but I'm not exactly the best at storyboarding, or at least like cleanly, but I really like color and like color design, so I sort of bargained with myself and so what if I do a color script instead? So these are just general like fake frames of what my possible film would like be like, and I'm pretty happy with how this turns out. I think the look of it is reading well. You can tell vaguely what the story is like. Yeah, like most of the frames are pretty like clear. You can tell what's happening. Yeah, there's me showing I can do composition and do mood and such. And also I put this as my last piece of the creative work because I wanted to like end strong with a good impression. Blah blah blah, you know. And, you know, color script, boarding, narrative, you know, those are things you want to include in animation portfolio, so I put that last. And also I just really like this piece. I think it was probably a strong choice to end off because my creative works had a pretty rough start, to be honest. So this is sort of me compensating. But if I were to reply again, I don't think I would have put this as my first piece, even though I like it so much, because it just wouldn't make sense in a pitch. Like, I haven't introduced the characters or the scene yet. Why would I just slap a storyboard in front? So I think it does serve well that this piece was my last one. Ooh, okay, so overall stuff about the portfolio. Um, so okay, laying the logistics. I submitted 14 figure pieces, 7 like observational non-figure pieces, and 9 creative works. So it's not that much. I know for Calarts they require, I think on their website they require 15 observational works, but that includes like all observational works, not just like figure drawings. So there is a lot of room to what you can do. And the way I organize my portfolio, as you can see, is that I put my figure drawings first, and then I put the non-figure ones, and then I put the sort of like observationals, but like not really creatives in the middle because that was a gray area, and then I put my creatives last. And then each of these categories, I made sure I had both a strong start and end. And then in the middle, I could just rearrange it to like whatever flowed better. Like that's something I'm constantly talking about. I'm just going through the pieces, like the organization of it, what impression it would leave, like the flow of it. That is something to think about because the people reviewing your work are not going to spend a long time. They're going to be looking at it really quick. You want to think about like overall, does this pace well? Does it flow? But I did talk about how my creatives works were like rearranged weirdly. Ideally, you would have more creative works than I did, or like if not like more better ones, because I had very few works, so I felt like I had to put in my more illustrative work to compensate. I don't think like including illustrative work is like that detrimental if it's like really good stuff that you enjoy. But yeah, I don't think I should have put it in as my first pieces. And also, a lot of people ask like, how to choose your creative work. And like I said before, there isn't really like a direction you do. Like obviously it's an animation portfolio. Like things you would need animation. Like that is the story. If you have a demo reel, you can put that. If you have a film, you can put that into. Just think about like your creative voice, like what stories you can tell, I think, in my opinion, like what makes you distinctive. Like the reason why you put your observational work first is to be like, yeah, I can draw. I have the technical skills to back me up. And now here are my stories. I hope this makes sense. I'm really just talking and rambling. Here's a trick I use when like looking at like how I want my portfolio to look presentable when you think about it is like really zooming out of your drawing and like looking at the thumbnail. And if you can tell from the thumbnail what the thing is and like you can see it clear, then it's good. But if it's not, then think about like why it is and change it. Like if you're looking at this Google Drive right here, you've probably have watched the video far enough and have seen all these pieces. And when you zoom far enough, you know what they are. Like you look at the first one and you know like that is a person knitting figure. And when you click it, you're like, yeah. Because even if your stuff is good, if it ends up looking like modeled from a faraway distance, then that might be a little hard to read. Yeah. So think about that when creating like the presentation work, because you will probably edit your work either physically or digitally, which by the way is totally fine. I digitally edit like everything. I scanned all my stuff using the Notes app on my iPad and then I screenshotted it. Yeah, so you really don't need like a fancy scanner too. And then like I would digitally touch them up either through like the Photos app or through just like Photoshop editing, because like it really isn't that detrimental to like remove a stray like smear here or there to Photoshop. Like it really doesn't matter. Yeah. Okay, so this is just a scan of my Calarts Sketchbook. Sketchbook is free to download on my Gumroad, and you can look up the pages one by one, but honestly, it's nothing really spectacular because I did my sketchbook in like a week. Not smart. And the way I handled it was that, as you can see, my sketchbook is spiral bound, and I had a lot of books of like the same size and the same paper. So I was just casually working on a bunch of sketchbooks of this size, and then I compiled them. Like I unbound them from their spine and compiled my favorite pages together. So then it would sort of feel like it was a sketchbook. I don't actually recommend doing that. Please actually work on your sketchbook. Don't be like me. But that's also because I didn't consider applying until really late. So I wasn't really in the mindset of creating a sketchbook because they take a long time to make, yeah. So what advice do I have a sketchbook? I don't know. I feel like a lot of sketchbooks like you find online or like at least the ones on YouTube that get really popular all have a very distinctive like clean, polished and very like planned out look. But if you look at my if you look at my sketchbook, it's so messy. Wait, let me see to find the messiest pages I have. Oh yeah, it's this page. Okay, it's not that messy now that I look at it, but like look at what the left is. It's kind of a mumble jumble of. It was literally just me drawing random women, and then I didn't like what I drew those random women, so I like filled them up with this like dark blue acrylic paint, and then I drew like pencil on top. It's extremely layered, right? And then if you look on the right, it's a bunch of random people from Zoom, and they're all layered and such, and then I have a little comic there. Yeah, like my sketchbook is really incoherent. Like, did I think this is like one of the first pages too? And it's just me smearing paint around and sort of drawing in like palm trees. There's like a weird little cryptid there on the right. Yeah, it's not as like It's not like super messy, but it's not polished, you know? Look at whatever's happening there on the left, right? It's a bunch of hands, people, smears and stuff. Mm. Oh yeah, this is my film study. As you can see, only some of them were traditionally colored. Well, look, I mean, look at this figure page. It's just me drawing that ballerina constantly, and me drawing more ballerinas. And this was me studying the ballerina again, and some faces. And then, oh yeah, there's my portfolio piece on the right, and then there's your little people on the left. None of this is very coherent, really. But it's fine. Like, this is how I approach my analysis in the sketchbook. And I didn't want to hold myself back. I just kind of draw loosely, messy. Yeah. And honestly, if maybe I'm just being harsh on myself, but if you look closely, these aren't very like technically polished or advanced. Because the sketchbook is not as important as the portfolio. It's kind of just there to exist to be like, okay, so this is the mind behind the portfolio, and we know this person has the technical skills naturally to back it up, and this is their thought process. So that's kind of how I made my sketchbook in mind. It's very loose. It's just me doing whatever, like I put a lot of silly comics, as you can see in the end. Because I like drawing little guys, little people. Yeah, so just overall advice in the sketchbook is to not be too stressed about it. Some people think you need to put like a lot of pages into a sketchbook and such. Mine is, what does it say? It says 32. So 32 times 2 is like a 60 page. That's still kind of big, but when I flipped through it to record, it was like 2 to 3 minutes long, which is like good enough. I know some people accepted who like who submitted a 20-page sketchbook. And then I know some people submitted multiple books. Like, do whatever is easiest for you and what you think conveys your skill. Yeah, you don't need to force yourself to draw it in a certain way. Just do what you want, because the sketchbooks you see online and the ones that get viral are a very small portion of what actually a lot of accepted sketchbooks look like. And I feel like the more you look at them and the more you like hyper analyze them, you end up sort of copying them, which makes you look less distinctive. Like, I still kind of use some things that are seen in a lot of portfolios. Like in this one, right? I wanted to make the figures more obvious, so I added a little like colored in background. Like, it's just those small things, but yeah. Don't force yourself to make a sketchbook you don't like, you know? Like, this is something you're going to put a lot of time and effort into. Okay, so this is the stuff I made for my ArtCenter portfolio, which was just the hunter story I made for my Calarts creative work and just like expanded and refined. And I heard that the requirements for ArtCenter have changed. I applied to entertainment design animation track, by the way. I heard the requirements have changed, so it might not be accurate to what people actually have to apply with now, but I'm just going to show the work I had to make. So it starts out with synopsis, and then I put the title at the top, and it was like, a retired animal hunter, blah blah blah, this is a story. And you can actually see me put the one snapshot I made into the background because I thought it might spice it up a little. But I didn't put this actual snapshot in the back because I really didn't like it. But yeah, so that's a synopsis, and then a little character lineup. So, right, I put character lineup on top left, and this is my character lineup. Okay. First of all, the biggest thing that bothers me about what I did is that these look like three separate characters from, like, they don't look like they belong in the same world because I drew in slightly different styles for each of them, which I should have thought that through. But I was in a rush. Like, I did my entire, like, creative section of ArtCenter in, like, 3 days, I think. And then I applied in a week. Most of the stuff was what I used for Calarts, and I just edited it. But like the stuff I had to make for ArtCenter, I like did in less than a week. which is not good for my hand or my mental sanity. But yeah, if I were to do this again, I would make them look like they all belong in the same story. I think I like the look of the most right one character more. And I also kind of didn't follow the prompt in that I didn't really make three distinctive characters because the two characters on the right are just the same character but from different time periods. But I'll get into more detail of why I don't like stuff and what I would change, yeah. So, character one. Character one, retired British hunter. So, he's the old guy that I drew for my Calarts portfolio, yeah. So, you can see the work I made for Calarts. I just colored it, I cleaned it up, I sort of rearranged it to create this kind of look, yeah. So it looks more polished, clean up, I made a like actual decent looking full body. Overall, I'm like pretty happy with it. I could have made it more clear and like he could have more form, but it's probably the best design. No, it's probably the like most clear design I have. It's oh, it's overall well. And then on the right, you see me putting like references I had. These are all just like random photos I slapped in later. I didn't really use photos when coming up with my design, which I should have. Honestly, reference is good. But yeah. And then my second character was just a young British hunter. And the first thing I would notice is that the retired British hunter and young British hunter don't look that different. I know they're supposed to be the same character, but I really should have made them like visually much more like younger and older. Like I already couldn't turn back with my decision of making the retired British hunter have like dark hair, but I think if I were to redo the story, I would definitely make him have like white grayed out hair to show age. And I probably would have them in like different body types, honestly. So then the young British hunter would have much more like buff, like fresh, healthy body versus the retired hunter. He's old, he's shriveled, he's probably like has terrible back posture or something like that. Yeah. I would have emphasized like the stark contrast between the beginning and end of his life. So I followed the same idea. I made some like facial expressions and then I did some general studies of like how he would hold the gun and then I had some references of how like British hunters from that time looked. Like I said before, if I were to read this again, I would do this in a style that actually looks like they belong together. But overall, I think it's okay. And this is my third character, which is the wolf, and I'm pretty proud with how this page turned out. The wolf's design is pretty simple. It's just a black or gray wolf with very distinctive, like graphic grid highlight eyes and very sharp teeth. So I put in the other stuff I made for Calarts in the bottom. So you could see how this wolf isn't very like a concrete design and it's constantly morphing and like shifting as a shadow. So I wanted to emphasize that to the like reviewers that this wolf isn't like a typical character design. Oh yeah, and then I put some references on the right, to be like, I looked at a real wolf when designing this, yes. So this is the start of my keys, and then for ArtCenter, they require you to do, I think, or at least when I applied, they require you to do 5 keys, which are like tests of how your like pitch would look like if it was like a film or like actually a story. So then I did them by the order of narration, but you can tell which ones like I drew first or like I really enjoyed making more though. Okay, so this is the first shot I actually made, which is the hunter. He's like menacingly standing in his trophy room. There's really dramatic red lighting. The lunar sun is in the back, super bright, really harsh room lighting, yeah. I want to go for a very like grim, like spooky look. There's a center composition. It's like asymmetry from the heads. Yeah, overall, I think the atmosphere was conveyed. I feel like the background was kind of simple. I definitely could have played with making the walls more interesting or like actually like European instead of just plain walls and such, but I was in crunch time. And I definitely could have made the character's body like not so blended in with the chair because he's kind of hard to read right now, but yeah. This is the second key I made for my ArtCenter Portfolio, and is definitely my favorite key I've made. It's probably my most favorite composition. It's like rule of thirds. There's a very strong center focus. You can like all the lines are pointing to each other. It just reads really well. Yeah. So this is when the hunter is first approached by the wolf shadow and he freaks out and holds the candlelight. And I think it's a nice use of, oh, I can see where the environment is. This is his house. You can see the things in the back. So you sort of understand the environment more. You see like the scale of how scary the wolf is and how frightened the old man is. Just works very well, and it's a nice style test, yeah. This is the third key I made, which is the entering the dream sequence where the wolf starts confronting the hunter about all the animals he's shot. So the back is a sort of like ass trap jumble of all these dead bodies lying in a pool, and then the wolf is like shadowing over the hunter very threateningly. So first off, I'm so bothered by how I drew the red eyes. It just looks very sloppy compared to the very crisp, like lineless look I had for everything else in this piece. But other than me being nitpicky, there's like another center composition. It's like asymmetry. I think the overall values are pretty clear. I think the white background provides a very like dreamy like sequence. I think overall it's okay, it reads fine. I think I could have put some more lighting to make the hunter separate from the wolf, but you get the general idea. Alright, this is my fourth key, which was the sequence where the retired hunter starts entering the memory of his the younger hunter, and then they start arguing over their different values. So the retired hunter has already been confronted and is starting to understand the mistakes he's made, while the retired hunter, who obviously doesn't know the consequences yet, sees a wolf standing there in front of the meadow and wants to kill it. And this wolf is supposed to be a reference to the shadow wolf, yeah. So this is sort of the moment where he's meeting the past with the present, and it's like contradiction of his morals of, should I stop the wolf from dying a second time? Or should I just let it happen? And this is my final key where we see the young hunter about to shoot the gun at the shadow wolf, who cowers in fear, while the retired hunter puts his body between them and says that basically, if you want to kill the wolf, you have to kill me. So this is the pivotal end of the story where his younger self, because it's a memory, right, will obviously still shoot the gun and basically kill his current self. And the story is all about like, you can't hide away from the past or whatever. Yeah. So I think the composition for this is pretty good. Everything goes to one direction, right? It flows while the contrast is reading pretty clear and all that technical stuff. And then this is my storyboard. So I took the color script I made for Calarts and then edited a bit for my storyboard. And then I realized there was like a huge portion of it that didn't make sense as a storyboard. So then I drew those in, and it's in a very different style, but whatever, it's fine. And then I also numbered each of them so you can tell the sequence of it, and then I also added short notes so you can tell what's sort of going on, but I didn't make them too long. Overall thoughts about my ArtCenter portfolio is that I should have started it much earlier. I should have given myself much more time because a lot of my errors and the nitpicks I have now are things that could have been solved if I just spent a little more time planning or just had more time to refine what I made. But given the fact that I spent like 3 to 5 days on all of this, it turned out fine. Please manage your time well. I know that's a very easy thing to say, a very hard thing to actually do, but it is hard to plan your time, but really do not hurt yourself or force yourself to draw that much, because after I did my ArtCenter portfolio, I straight up couldn't use my hand for a good few weeks because I had overexerted myself so much from apps. Yeah, like, take care of yourself both mentally and physically. When you're in the moment of doing applications, you really feel like it's the end of the world and it's like do or die. But if you hurt yourself too much, then you won't be able to keep drawing, which is like such an essential part. Yeah, this is me just spewing to be safe, you know? Overall advice is to not be too hard on yourself. I know that sounds very easy coming from someone who's actually like finally went through it, and it feels very stressful in the moment. But yeah, take care of yourself. And if you finished watching this video till the very end, thank you. I feel like I just said a lot of stuff out of my mouth and none of it actually is coherent. Hopefully I can edit it to be coherent more. If any of you have any questions or anything, you can comment or message me. Or if you have any thoughts and want to fight me about it, you can also message me about it. I hope this is helpful to at least someone out there who's watching this. And yeah, thank you. Bye bye.